At my brother's promotion celebration, my aunt asked, "Still working that little job?" I said, "No, I bought the company that fired him last month." The champagne room at the Meridian Country Club went silent in that specific way that tells you everyone heard what you just said, even though the jazz quartet was still playing softly in the corner. My Aunt Diane stood there holding her glass of Veuve Clicquot, her mouth forming a perfect O of confusion, while my brother, Kevin, stared at me from across the room like I just announced I had a terminal illness. The thing is, I hadn't planned to say it. I'd driven 3 hours from Seattle to Portland for the celebration dinner, worn my nice suit, brought an appropriate gift, fully intending to smile through another evening of being treated like the family disappointment. But something about the way Aunt Diane said little job with that particular mix of pity and condescension, the same tone she'd been using since I was 23 and chose software development over law school, just broke something in me. I'd been working in tech for 11 years when Kevin got his job at Paramount Digital Solutions. I was 34, he was 31. Our parents, Robert and Margaret Chen. Robert and Margaret Lawson had always positioned Kevin as the successful one, the charismatic one, the one with the prestigious career in business development. I was the quiet son, the one who sat in front of computers all day, the one whose work nobody really understood. "What exactly do you do again?" my father would ask at family dinners, and I'd explain for the 100th time that I designed enterprise software architecture. And he'd nod with that glazed look that meant he'd stopped listening. Meanwhile, Kevin would talk about his latest sales numbers at Paramount, his corporate retreats in Cabo, his partnerships with Fortune 500 clients, and everyone would lean in fascinated. Paramount Digital Solutions was a mid-sized marketing technology firm, about 300 employees handling digital transformation projects for retail and hospitality companies. Kevin had been there for 6 years, worked his way up from sales associate to senior business development manager. He made around $180,000 a year with bonuses. Good money, respectable career. Our parents treated it like he was running Google. My career had taken a different path. After graduating from University of Washington with a computer science degree, I'd worked for Amazon for 3 years, then moved to a startup called DataStream Analytics. Small company, maybe 40 people, focusing on real-time data processing solutions for enterprise clients. I was employee number 12. The founders, Thomas Reeves and Linda Shao, were brilliant engineers who understood the market but needed someone who could actually build the architecture that would scale. I spent 4 years there, 80. Our weeks living on coffee and takeout, building the core platform that would eventually process billions of transactions daily. When DataStream got acquired by IBM for $340 million in 2019, my equity stake combined with my retention bonus netted me $8.2 million after taxes. I was 29 years old. I didn't tell my family, not because I was hiding it exactly, but because they'd never asked. They assumed tech jobs meant mid-level programming work, decent salary. Nothing special. I let them think that. I used the money to start angel investing in other startups, joined a venture capital group, kept working as a consultant for companies that needed someone to fix their broken systems. The first red flag about Kevin's situation came 14 months ago, October 2023, when he called me at 11 o'clock at night. I was in my home office in Capitol Hill reviewing code for a client project when my phone lit up with his name. We weren't close. We talked maybe once every 2 months, usually when our parents forced interaction at holidays. "Hey," he said, his voice tight. "I need some advice. Technical advice." I leaned back in my chair, surprised. Kevin had never asked me for professional help, ever. "What's going on?" I asked. He explained that Paramount was implementing a new customer relationship management system, a massive overhaul of their entire sales infrastructure. Project was running 6 months behind schedule, $2.3 million over budget, and the development team couldn't figure out why the database kept corrupting client records. "They're blaming my department," Kevin said, "saying we're inputting data wrong, but I know that's not it. The system's just broken. Can you look at it?" I told him I'd need access to their technical documentation, their architecture diagrams, their code repositories. He said he'd see what he could do. 3 days later, he sent me a zip file with about 40 documents. I opened them on a Friday night, expecting to spend maybe an hour glancing through. Instead, I spent the entire weekend increasingly horrified. The system Paramount had built was a disaster. They'd hired a consulting firm called Vert.x Solutions to design and implement it, paid them $5.66 million. And what they'd received was essentially a Frankenstein's monster of outdated technologies held together with duct, tape, and prayer. The database architecture was fundamentally flawed. The security protocols were non-existent. The API integrations were so poorly designed that data corruption wasn't a bug. It was an inevitable feature. I documented everything, wrote a 20-page technical analysis, and sent it to Kevin with a simple message. This system will fail catastrophically within 6 months. You need to shut it down and rebuild from scratch. Here's what I'd recommend. Kevin thanked me, said he'd pass it along to his CTO. I never heard back about it. Christmas came and went. At our parents' house in Lake Oswego, a suburb of Portland, with manicured lawns and houses that all looked vaguely the same, Kevin was the center of attention. He just closed a major deal with a hotel chain, brought them on as a client, worth $400,000 annually. Dad toasted him. Mom literally applauded. I sat at the end of the table eating ham, wondering if anyone would ask about my work. Nobody did. February 2024. The call came not from Kevin this time, but from a headhunter named Victoria Sterling. Mr. Lawson, she said, very formal, very professional. I represent a private equity firm that's considering an acquisition in the marketing technology space. Your name came up in our research as someone with both technical expertise and M&A experience. Would you be interested in consulting on due diligence for a target company? I asked, which company? She said Paramount, Digital Solutions. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What's the situation? I asked. Victoria explained that Paramount was in financial trouble. The CRM system failure had cascaded. They'd lost 3 major clients. Their revenue had dropped 38% year over year, and the board was looking to sell before things got worse. The private equity firm Blackstone Ridge Capital wanted someone to assess whether the company was salvageable or if they should walk away. She offered me $50,000 for 2 weeks of work. I took the job not for the money, for the information. The due diligence process gave me access to everything: financial records, client contracts, employee files, technical infrastructure, legal liabilities, pending lawsuits. I spent 12 days in Paramount's offices in downtown Portland, interviewing department heads, reviewing code, analyzing their market position. What I found was worse than I'd expected. The CRM disaster had cost them $8.4 million in lost revenue and remediation costs. Their client retention rate had dropped from 82% to 51%. They had pending litigation from 2 former clients claiming negligence and breach of contract. Their technical debt was astronomical. Their management team was incompetent, had made decision after decision that prioritized short-term profits over long-term stability. But underneath all that chaos, there was a good business. They had excellent brand recognition, talented sales staff, valuable intellectual property in their original analytics platform, and relationships with clients who would return if the company could prove it had fixed its problems. I also found Kevin's personnel file. In March 2024, 3 weeks after I started the due diligence work, Kevin had been fired, terminated for cause. The official reason was failure to meet performance standards and loss of major client accounts attributable to employee negligence. Reading between the lines and cross-referencing with client exit interviews, what had happened was this. Kevin had been the account manager for 3 of the clients who'd left because of the CRM disaster. When those clients complained, when they threatened legal action, Kevin had apparently tried to blame the technical team, had sent emails claiming he'd warned them about the system issues, but he hadn't. I'd seen the email chains. He'd actually defended the Vert.xx implementation in multiple meetings, had pushed back against engineers who raised concerns because his commission structure incentivized him to keep clients on the new platform regardless of whether it worked. The company fired him to appease the angry clients, to show they were holding people accountable. It didn't work. The clients left anyway, but Kevin was gone. Unemployment benefits denied because of the termination cause. Reputation damaged in the Portland tech sales community because word spread about why he'd been let go. I found all this out on a Wednesday afternoon, sitting in a Paramount conference room reading HR files. I felt sick. Not because I felt bad for Kevin exactly, but because I knew he'd never told our family the real story. I called my mother that evening, casual check-in, asked how everyone was doing. Oh, Kevin's looking for a new opportunity, she said brightly. He left Paramount. They were limiting his growth potential, so he's being selective about his next role. Very strategic. Your father and I are so proud of how he's handling his career. I didn't correct her. I wrote my report for Blackstone Ridge Capital, delivered my recommendation. Acquire the company, but only at a significant discount to their asking price, and only if they were willing to invest heavily in rebuilding the technical infrastructure and replacing senior management. Blackstone offered $12 million for a company that had been valued at $35 million 2 years earlier. Paramount's board accepted. Here's what I didn't tell Blackstone. Here's what I didn't tell anyone. I had $14.3 million in liquid assets from my various investments and exits. I'd been looking for the right acquisition opportunity, something I could actually run and fix and build into something valuable. And I just spent 2 weeks learning everything about a broken company that I knew exactly how to repair. 3 days after Blackstone's offer was accepted before the deal closed, I called Victoria. "What if I wanted to make a competing offer?" I asked. Long pause. "You'd need to move fast," she said. "They've already signed a letter of intent with Blackstone, but if you can beat their offer and show proof of funds within 72 hours, the board might consider it." I spent that night on the phone with my lawyer, Daniel Greenstein, 23 years, practicing corporate law partner at Greenstein & Associates. "You're serious about this?" he asked. "You want to buy your brother's former company?" I told him I wanted to buy an undervalued business that I could turn around. The Kevin angle was coincidental. He didn't believe me, but he did the work. We structured an offer of $14.5 million, all cash, no financing contingency, close in 30 days. I provided bank statements proving I had the funds. We submitted Friday morning. The Paramount board met Monday. They had two offers: Blackstone's $12 million with a 60-day close and probable layoffs, or my $14.5 million with a 30-day close, and my commitment to invest an additional $3 million in infrastructure improvements and my personal involvement in the turnaround. They chose my offer. We signed the purchase agreement on April 18, 2024. I became the owner of Paramount Digital Solutions. I didn't announce it publicly. I didn't tell my family. I registered the purchase through an LLC, Cascade Holdings Group, kept my name off the public filings. I hired a new CEO, Amanda Fletcher. 15 years in marketing technology, previously ran a successful digital agency in San Francisco. I brought in a new CTO, Rajesh Patel, one of the best systems architects I knew from my data stream days. Together, we started the rebuild. We fired 6 senior managers who'd been responsible for the Vertex disaster. We hired a proper engineering team. We shut down the broken CRM and implemented a new system I designed myself, built on modern architecture that actually worked. We reached out to the clients who'd left, showed them the changes we'd made, offered them incentives to return. Within 6 months, we'd brought back 4 of the 7 departed clients, signed 3 new ones, and stabilized the revenue. Kevin, meanwhile, was struggling. I heard about it through my mother's carefully curated updates, the way she'd mentioned casually that Kevin was still interviewing, that the market was tough right now, that he was being very selective. I heard it through LinkedIn, where his profile said, "Seeking new opportunities for 8 months straight." I heard it through mutual acquaintances in Portland who mentioned they'd seen Kevin at networking events looking increasingly desperate. In November 2024, he finally landed something. Business development associate at a small firm called Pacific Marketing Group. Significant step down from his Paramount role. Salary probably around $85,000 base, but it was employment. Our parents were thrilled. They decided to throw him a celebration dinner because getting back on your feet after a career transition shows real resilience, as my mother put it. The invitation came via email. Robert and I are hosting a celebration dinner for Kevin's new position at Pacific Marketing Group, Saturday, December 14th, Meridian Country Club. We'd love for you to be there. Please bring Julia if she's available. Julia was my girlfriend of 2 years, a pediatric surgeon at Seattle Children's Hospital. Brilliant and kind, and someone who actually understood that my work had value. She couldn't make it. Surgery schedule. IRSVP. Yes, for myself only. I drove down Saturday afternoon, checked into a hotel because I wasn't staying at my parents' house. I arrived at Meridian at 6:30. The celebration was in one of their private dining rooms, wood-paneled walls, crystal chandeliers, the kind of place that charged $200 per person for dinner. There were about 30 people, extended family, some of Kevin's friends, a few of our parents' country club acquaintances. Kevin was holding court near the bar, looking relieved and happy, talking about his new role. I congratulated him, shook his hand, gave him the gift I'd brought, which was a nice bottle of Macallan 18 because I'm not a monster. He thanked me, asked about my work in that distracted way that meant he wasn't really interested. Still doing the tech consulting thing? He asked. I said yes. We made small talk for 90 seconds. Then he moved on to more important guests. Dinner was served at 7 o'clock. I sat between Aunt Diane and a cousin I barely knew. The meal was prime rib and roasted vegetables and overpriced wine. Conversations swirled around me. People asking Kevin about Pacific Marketing Group, what the company did, what his responsibilities would be, whether he saw himself staying long-term. He answered everything smoothly, positioned it as a strategic move, a chance to build something from the ground up at a growing company. Nobody asked me anything. I'd been at family dinners enough times to know how this worked. Then came the toasts. My father stood up, glass raised, and gave a speech about resilience and determination, and how proud he was that Kevin had navigated a difficult transition with such grace and professionalism. Everyone applauded. Kevin's best friend from college said something about Kevin always landing on his feet. More applause. My mother wiped away a tear and talked about how both her sons were successful in their own ways. Though she spent 90 seconds on Kevin's achievements and maybe 10 seconds acknowledging that I did well with computers. That's when Aunt Diane turned to me. She'd had 3 glasses of wine. Her face was flushed. She'd been watching the toasts with this expression of benevolent satisfaction like she was witnessing something truly special. "It must be hard," she said loud enough that several people nearby turned to look. "Watching your little brother achieve so much." I took a sip of water. "Not particularly," I said. She patted my hand. "Oh, sweetie, it's okay to admit it. You're still working that little job of yours, right? The computer thing. There's no shame in a steady paycheck, even if it's not glamorous like Kevin's career. The computer thing. 11 years of building systems that processed billions of dollars in transactions, that powered major corporations that had been acquired for hundreds of millions of dollars. The little job. I felt something crystallize, all the years of being dismissed and overlooked and treated like the lesser son, all of it hardening into perfect clarity. Actually, I said, setting down my water glass, "I'm not working that little job anymore." Diane's face brightened. "Oh, did you finally get a promotion? That's wonderful." Around us, conversations were pausing. People were starting to listen. Kevin was looking over from across the table, sensing something in the tone. "No," I said clearly. "I bought the company that fired Kevin last month." The silence was immediate and total. Even the jazz quartet seemed to stop mid-note, though that might have been my imagination. Diane's smile froze. My father's fork clattered against his plate. Kevin's face drained of color. "What?" my mother said. I looked at Kevin. "Paramount Digital Solutions. I acquired it in April. Took ownership on April 23rd to be specific. I've spent the last 8 months rebuilding it. We're profitable again as of October." Kevin stood up, his chair scraped against the floor. "That's not possible," he said. His voice was shaking. "Paramount was sold to a private equity firm, Blackstone something. Blackstone Ridge Capital made an offer. I confirmed. I made a better one. $14.5 million, all cash. The board accepted. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, found the signed purchase agreement. I slid the phone across the table toward Kevin. He picked it up with trembling hands, read the first page, the signature block at the bottom. Owner Cascade Holdings Group, LLC, authorized representative David Lawson. "You," he whispered. "This whole time you've owned Paramount." I nodded. "Amanda Fletcher is the CEO. She's excellent. We brought in a new technical team, fixed the CRM disaster that cost you your job, won back most of the clients who left. Annual revenue is back up to $28 million. We're projecting $35 million next year." My father found his voice. "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at him. "For the same reason nobody asked what I do for a living, because it didn't occur to you that I might be doing something worth mentioning." Aunt Diane was shaking her head. "But how could you afford to buy a company? You're just a programmer." "Just a programmer. My equity stake in DataStream Analytics, when it was acquired by IBM, netted me $8.2 million after taxes," I said. "I've been angel investing since then. My portfolio is worth about $20 million now. I used 14.5 of it to buy Paramount plus another $3 million in infrastructure improvements." The numbers hung in the air. My mother's hand was over her mouth. Various relatives were staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Kevin sat back down heavily. "You knew I was fired," he said. "You knew. And you bought the company anyway." I shook my head. "I found out you were fired during the due diligence process. I bought the company because it was undervalued, and I knew how to fix it. Your termination was incidental." That was a lie. It wasn't incidental, but it sounded better than admitting I'd enjoyed the irony. My mother turned to Kevin. "You told us you left because they were limiting your growth." Kevin's face flushed. "I was terminated," he admitted quietly. "For cause because of the client losses from the CRM failure." Aunt Diane rallied. "Well, that wasn't Kevin's fault. That was a technical problem. I could have let it go, should have let it go, but 11 years of dismissal, of being treated like the lesser son, of watching Kevin get credit for things he didn't do. While I got ignored for things I'd built, it all came pouring out. Actually, I said I reviewed all the documentation during due diligence. Kevin was warned by his technical team that the CRM implementation was flawed. He pushed back against those warnings in multiple meetings because his commission structure incentivized keeping clients on the new platform. When the system failed and clients complained, he tried to blame the engineers. Paramount fired him to appease the clients. It didn't work, but that's why he was terminated. I pulled out my phone again, found the email chains I'd saved. I have the emails if anyone wants to read them. Kevin stood up again. You're humiliating me. His voice was rising at my own celebration dinner. You're trying to destroy me. I stayed seated. I'm telling the truth. There's a difference. He turned to our parents. Are you going to let him do this? Are you going to let him ruin my night? My father looked between us. He seemed smaller somehow, older. David, he said slowly, even if what you're saying is true, this isn't the time or place. I stood up then. You're right, I said. This was supposed to be Kevin's celebration. I apologize for disrupting it. I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair. Congratulations on the new job, Kevin. I genuinely hope Pacific Marketing Group works out for you. I turned to leave. My mother called out, David, wait, we need to talk about this. I stopped at the door. About what? About how you never once asked about my career. About how you spent 34 years treating me like the backup son. About how when Kevin was struggling, you threw him a party at a country club. But when I built something worth millions, nobody noticed. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We didn't know. How could we know if you never told us that was fair? I'd kept it secret, but I'd kept it secret because they'd never cared to ask. You knew I worked at DataStream. I said the acquisition was in the Wall Street Journal, the Seattle Times, TechCrunch. My name was in the articles as one of the key technical architects. You didn't read them because you don't read about tech companies. You don't care about what I do. I walked out of the Meridian Country Club, got in my car, a Lexus LS 500 that I'd paid cash for, and drove back to Seattle. My phone exploded with calls and texts before I even hit the highway. Kevin, how could you do this to me? My mother, please come back. We need to talk. My father, this is inappropriate, and you need to apologize. Aunt Diane, you've always been jealous of your brother. I ignored all of them. I stopped at a rest area outside Olympia, sat in the parking lot with the engine running, and called Julia. How did it go? She asked. I told them I bought Kevin's old company, I said. Long pause. How did they take it? I laughed. It came out slightly unhinged, about as well as you'd expect. She was quiet for a moment. Are you okay? I thought about it. Yeah, I said. Actually, I think I am. The fallout was immediate and messy. Kevin left 12 voicemails over the next 3 days, cycling through anger and hurt and accusation. The theme was consistent. I deliberately sabotaged him. I'd bought Paramount specifically to humiliate him. I was a terrible brother who couldn't stand to see him succeed. My parents called constantly, trying to mediate, trying to get me to apologize, to smooth things over, to make peace. I didn't answer. Finally, on the 4th day, my father sent an email. Subject line, family discussion required. The body was 2 paragraphs about how my behavior at the dinner had been unacceptable, how I'd embarrassed Kevin and the family, how my success didn't give me the right to be cruel, and how I needed to write Kevin an apology letter and attend family therapy sessions to repair the damage I'd caused. I read it twice. Then I wrote back, Dad, I'm going to explain this once. For 34 years, you and Mom have treated Kevin as the golden child and me as the afterthought. You've celebrated his accomplishments and ignored mine. You've listened to his stories and dismissed my work. You've given him attention, validation, support, and given me polite disinterest. I accepted that. I built my life and career without your support or recognition, and I did fine. But when Aunt Diane called my career that little job, when she pied me for not being as successful as Kevin, that was the moment you all needed to correct her. You needed to say, actually, David has built an incredible career. You didn't. You stayed silent. So I corrected her myself. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth. I'm not attending therapy to make you feel better about ignoring me for 3 decades. I love you both, but I'm done performing humility to make Kevin feel superior. Send. My father responded within an hour. Longer email this time. He was hurt, he said. He and my mother had always been proud of both their sons. They'd never played favorites. If I'd felt overlooked, that was my own insecurity, not their failure. They'd always assumed I preferred to keep my life private, which was why they didn't ask. They'd always thought I was independent and didn't need validation. And besides, they didn't understand tech, so what was the point of asking about work they couldn't comprehend? The email made me angrier than anything else had. It was gaslighting dressed up as confusion. I called my therapist, Dr. Michael Okonkwo, licensed clinical psychologist specializing in family systems therapy. I'd been seeing him monthly for 2 years, working through various issues. They're rewriting history, I told him, making it my fault for not demanding their attention. Dr. Okono listened to the whole story, then said something that crystallized everything. David, you've been operating under the assumption that if you were successful enough, impressive enough, accomplished enough, your family would eventually notice and value you. But that's not how narcissistic family systems work. The golden child doesn't earn their position through achievement. They have it by assignment. You are never going to get their validation no matter what you accomplish because that's not your role in the family narrative. It hit me like cold water. So what do? I asked. You accept that you can't change them. He said you grieve the family you wanted, and you build relationships with people who actually see you. 3 weeks later, Christmas invitations went out. My mother called to tell me they were doing Christmas Eve at their house as always, and she really hoped I'd come and maybe we could all just move past the unpleasantness at Kevin's dinner. I asked if anyone had acknowledged that they'd spent decades dismissing my career. David, sweetie, we never dismissed you. We just didn't understand. But we're very proud now that we know. Now that they knew I had money. That's what she meant. I declined the invitation. Spent Christmas in Seattle with Julia and her family. Her parents asked intelligent questions about my work, about Paramount's turnaround, about my investment strategy. Her father, a retired engineer, actually understood what I'd built at DataStream. It was strange and wonderful being seen. New Year came and went. January 2025. I got a call from my lawyer, Daniel. I have something you should see, he said. Kevin's threatening to sue you. I met him at his office. He handed me a letter from Kevin's lawyer, a general practice attorney in Portland named Jeffrey Ashton. The letter claimed that I had tortuously interfered with Kevin's employment relationship with Paramount Digital Solutions by deliberately acquiring the company with the intent to harm Kevin's career prospects. They were demanding $500,000 in damages for lost wages, emotional distress, and reputational harm. Daniel was grinning. This is the stupidest lawsuit I've seen in 20 years, he said. Kevin was fired 2 months before you acquired Paramount. You can't interfere with an employment relationship that no longer exists. Plus, you didn't fire him. The previous ownership did. Plus, you've actually improved the company, which, if anything, helps Kevin's reputation by showing the problems weren't his fault. I read the letter again. What should I do? I asked. Ignore it. Daniel said it's a shakedown. Kevin thinks you'll settle just to avoid hassle. If he actually files, we'll move to dismiss and it'll be over in 3 months. But my guess is he won't file. This is just posturing. Daniel was right. The lawsuit never materialized. But the letter told me something important. Kevin wasn't just hurt or embarrassed. He was financially desperate. I did some research. Pacific Marketing Group was a struggling firm. Barely 20 employees, revenue under $5 million annually. Kevin's salary was probably around $70,000, maybe $80,000 with commission. He'd gone from $180,000 at Paramount to less than half that. He had a mortgage on a condo in the Pearl District, a car payment on a BMW 5 Series, a lifestyle built for his old salary. He was drowning. Part of me felt satisfied. Part of me felt guilty about feeling satisfied. I mentioned it in therapy. You're allowed to have complex feelings. Dr. Okonkwo said, you can simultaneously recognize Kevin's suffering and also acknowledge that it's a natural consequence of his choices and your family's dysfunction. February 2025. Paramount hit a major milestone. We signed a contract with a national retail chain, 300 locations, $6.2 million annual deal. It was the biggest client in company history. Amanda Fletcher called me with the news, practically screaming with excitement. We celebrated with the whole team. Champagne in the office, bonuses for everyone involved. I felt proud, not because I'd beaten Kevin, because I'd built something real, fixed, something broken, created value and jobs and solutions. That evening, I posted on LinkedIn. Just a simple announcement, thrilled to announce that Paramount Digital Solutions has signed a major partnership with retail chain. Grateful to our incredible team for the hard work that made this possible. Onward. Within an hour, I had 50 congratulations messages. Within 2 hours, my mother had called 3 times. I answered the third call. I saw your LinkedIn post, she said. Her voice was strange. You really did it. You really turned that company around. Yes, I said. I told you I had. I showed your father. He didn't believe me at first. He thought maybe you were exaggerating or something at the dinner, but seeing it in writing from you officially, she trailed off. Mom, what do you want? I asked, long silence. I want to apologize, she said finally. Your father and I have been talking about what you said about how we treated you. And you're right. We didn't pay attention. We didn't ask. We just assumed you were fine. And that was easier than confronting our own bias toward Kevin. I waited, she continued. We're sorry. We're really, truly sorry. And we'd like to try to rebuild our relationship with you if you're willing. I felt a lot of things. Relief that they had finally acknowledged it. Anger that it took me publicly succeeding before they cared. Sadness that this was what it required. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully. But I need you to understand something. I don't need your pride now that I have money. I needed your interest when I was building things. I needed you to ask about my work because you cared about me, not because it was impressive. I understand, she said. I do, and I can't change the past, but I'd like to do better going forward if you'll let me. We talked for another 20 minutes. She asked about Paramount. Actually asked. Wanted to know about the retail deal, about my plans for the company, about the team I'd built. It felt genuine different. I agreed to have coffee with her the following week. Just us, no Kevin, no my father, a start. The coffee meeting happened at a place in Seattle. My mother drove up 3 hours, which itself felt significant. She brought photos of me as a kid, pictures I'd never seen. I found these going through old albums, she said. You were always so focused, so determined. I remember you spent 3 months building a computer from spare parts when you were 14. Your father and I thought it was a phase. We didn't realize it was the beginning of your career. We talked for 2 hours. She cried. I didn't. I'd done my crying in therapy, but I listened and I shared and I started to see the possibility of something different. My relationship with my father took longer. He was proud, stubborn, unwilling to admit he'd been wrong. But eventually, after my mother pushed him, he sent me an email. A real apology, not the defensive stuff from before. He acknowledged that he'd favored Kevin, that he'd dismissed my work, that he'd failed me as a father in important ways. He asked if we could talk. We did. Monthly phone calls, brief, at first gradually longer. He started reading. TechCrunch, trying to understand my industry. It was awkward and late, but it was something. Kevin and I didn't speak for 6 months. Then one day in June, I got a text. Can we talk? Not about lawsuits or money, just as brothers. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop, in between Portland and Seattle. He looked different, thinner, tired, older than 31. I've been in therapy, he said, working through a lot of stuff about our family, about competition, about how I've tied my self-worth to being better than you. I didn't say anything, he continued. I threw that lawsuit threat because I was desperate and humiliated and broke. My lawyer told me it was stupid. I knew it was stupid. I just wanted to hurt you like you'd hurt me. By telling the truth, I asked. He flinched. Yeah, by telling the truth. Because the truth made me look pathetic. We sat in silence. Then Kevin said, I'm not asking you to give me a job or loan me money or anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for how I treated you growing up, for taking credit for stuff, for enjoying being the favorite, for not standing up when people dismissed you. I looked at him. What do you want from this conversation? I asked. Honestly, he said, I want my brother back. I want to be able to talk to you without all this resentment and competition. I don't know if that's possible, but I wanted to try. We didn't become close overnight, but we started texting occasionally, brief updates, nothing deep. He told me about his work at Pacific Marketing Group, how he was learning to be more careful, more ethical, more focused on sustainable relationships instead of quick wins. I told him about Paramount's growth, about the new clients we were signing. In September, Kevin called with news. I got a job offer, real job, good company, marketing director at a tech startup in Portland, $140,000 salary, equity stake, good team. I wanted to tell you before I told Mom and Dad. That's great, I said, and I meant it. You think I should take it? He asked. Do you think it's the right fit? I asked back. Yeah, he said. I think so. I'm just nervous. Last time I thought I had a great job, it fell apart. Kevin, I said, you're not the same person you were at Paramount. You've learned things, grown, take the job. He took it, started in October. Our parents threw a small dinner, just family. They invited me. I went. It was different this time. They asked about my work. They listened. Kevin talked about his new role, but so did I. Equal time, equal interest. Aunt Diane was there. At one point, she came up to me, wine glass in hand. I owe you an apology, she said. That little job comment was rude and dismissive. I'm sorry, I accepted. What else could I do? Now it's January 2026. Paramount Digital Solutions is on track for $42 million in revenue this year. We've expanded to 180 employees. We're opening a second office in Austin. I'm still the owner, but Amanda Fletcher runs day-to-day operations. I spend most of my time on strategy and new investments. Julia and I got engaged in November, planning a wedding for next fall. Small ceremony, close friends and family, nothing extravagant. My parents are invited. Kevin's invited. Things aren't perfect with my family. We're not some fairy tale of reconciliation. There are still moments of tension, old patterns that resurface, but it's better different. My mother texts me articles about tech companies, asks my opinion. My father joined the board of a local STEM education nonprofit, asked me to consult on their programs. Kevin and I grab lunch when I'm in Portland, talk about work and life, and occasionally laugh about stupid stuff from when we were kids. The wound hasn't fully healed, but it's healing. I learned something through all of this. You can't make people see your value. You can only decide how much energy you'll spend seeking validation from people who won't give it. I spent 11 years building things, succeeding quietly, hoping my family would notice. They didn't. Not because my achievements weren't worth noticing, but because they weren't looking. When I finally forced them to look, it broke everything open. Painful, necessary, worth it. I don't regret what I said at Kevin's dinner. I don't regret buying Paramount. I don't regret any of it because it led me here to a life where people actually see me, where my work has meaning beyond family approval, where I've built something real. Paramount isn't just a company. It's proof. Proof that I'm not the lesser son, the backup, the one with the little job. I'm David Lawson. I build things. I fix things. I succeed. And I don't need anyone's permission or validation to do it. That dinner at the Meridian Country Club when Aunt Diane asked about my little job, it wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the culmination. Years of being overlooked compressed into one moment of truth. And when I told them I'd bought the company that fired Kevin, I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to be seen. Sometimes being seen requires disrupting the narrative. Sometimes it requires saying the truth loudly enough that people can't ignore it anymore. And sometimes the people who should have seen you all along will only notice when you force them to. I forced them and it worked. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but it worked. So when people ask if I regret it, if I wish I'd handled it differently, been more diplomatic, more gentle, I tell them no, because diplomacy is what I've been doing for 11 years. Being gentle is what got me dismissed. Speaking truth loudly in front of everyone, that's what finally changed things. And change, even painful change, is better than staying invisible. Thanks for listening to my story. If you made it this far, hit like. You've earned it.